What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Bryce, and today I'm going to be reading chapter 18 of the Parker Inheritance. Let's begin. Chapter 18. Candace stood on the front steps and watched as her father backed out of the driveway. The sun sat just above the houses across the street. The sky was bright and hazy at the same time. Her dad waved one last time, then drove away. Pressure built behind her eyes, but Candace wilted away. She kept having to remind everyone that she wasn't a baby. Now wasn't the time to prove the world right by crying. Across the street, the Joneses' front door opened. Brandon stepped out and jogged over to her. He held a piece of paper in his hand. "Got a second?" he asked. He was in his church clothes, skinny Oxfords, a button-down shirt without a single wrinkle, and black pants with a sharp crease. He even wore a black bow tie crooked around his neck. "How did you know I was out here?" "Your mom said that your dad was leaving this morning." Then he grinned. The good thing about getting up this early is that I can cross the street without getting jumped." I feel that. Candace knew he was joking, and she knew she was supposed to laugh, but her head and her heart were sitting in the passenger seat beside her father on the way back to Atlanta. "Candace, are you?" Maybe he saw something in her face, something that Candace didn't even know was there, because he paused. "I can come back later if..." "I'm fine," she snapped. "What's up?" "I think you should come to church with us." He handed her the paper. It was a printout from the video, the photo of the Washingtons all dressed up. Brandon pointed to the steps and door behind the Washingtons. "I knew something in that photo looked familiar. I think they're standing in front of my old church building. The church moved to a new location a few years ago before we moved here." Candace lowered the photo. "You think someone at your church might remember them?" Brandon nodded, a big grin on his face. "Sure do. Some of the older members would have been around back then." It can hurt to the door open behind them. "Candace, why are you still..." "Oh, hello, Brandon." Her mother quickly pulled her robe tighter around herself. "I didn't know you were out here. Do you want to come in?" "I can whip up a quick breakfast." "No, ma'am," he said. "I should be heading back." Candace handed the paper back to Brandon. "I'll ask Mom to let you know, okay?" "Sure thing. Service starts at 10. Her mother held the door open for Candace as Brandon looked away. "So he invited you to church?" Candace nodded. "Can I go?" "Well, of course. I hope you don't mind if I pass, though." Her mom had never put up any pretenses about being overly religious. Before the divorce, she went to church along with Candace and her dad, but she didn't sing in the choir or volunteer for the usher board. I'm in the usher board at my church too, so yeah, I know what the usher board is. I like ushering. Anyway, unlike her father, he mom admitted once that she did just enough so people wouldn't talk too badly about her. When her parents separated, her mom stopped attending, though Candace still went with her father sometimes. Candace had plenty of time before church, so instead of getting dressed, she opened the Perkins yearbook. Last night, after studying the tennis photo, she had paged the P's in the student section, searching for James Parker. But it had been late, so she figured she'd try to look again now that she had a good night's sleep. It took a few pages, but she finally realized that of course she wouldn't find James Parker in the student section of the yearbook. He couldn't be there. He was white, and Perkins was an all-black school. Makes sense. A few hours later, an usher led Candace and Brandon's family down the main aisle of Mount Carmel Baptist Church. Light flowed in from all the stained glass windows, making the room sunny and warm. A huge wooden cross hung on the wall behind the pulpit, right above the choir members. They wore traditional black robes with gold accents. She couldn't remember the last time her church choir had worn robes. The usher led them to a pew in the middle of the sanctuary. "This is the best place to sit," Brandon whispered. "Not too close, not too far." He tugged at his collar. "Oh, and you look nice." "Thanks." Candace had dressed up a little, though not as fancy as she would have back at home. She found a sundress at the bottom of her drawer and chose a pair of wedge sandals to match. Her father hated them, saying they looked too much like high heels, but Candace liked how they made her taller. I feel that. She had even let her mom do her hair, turning her ponytail into curled tresses. Candace frowned as a few other families entered the church. "That's Milo," she whispered. "He goes to church here? His dad's a deacon." The usher guided Milo's family toward an empty pew, but his mother shook her head and pointed toward the front. The usher whispered something to her, then motioned with his hand about the amount of space. Milo's mother pointed again, then passed the usher and continued up the aisle. The family followed her and was able to squeeze into a pew all the way in the front, but it was crowded. Eventually, the man at the end of the row slipped out and took another seat. A few minutes later, the organ began. The church was having a special service in honor of June 19th this month. The choir started with an old hymn, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." They sang in the classic way first. Everyone in the congregation smiled and nodded, all nice and polite-like. Halfway through, the drums came in. Then came the bass guitar. And then the woman leading the song sped up. With the choir right behind her, Brandon's mother, sister, and half of the church stood up and started clapping. Candace stood as well, bobbing and singing along to the music. Even though Brandon remained in his seat, he swayed to the beat as well. The choir sang 2 more songs, each better than the one before. Candace hoped they would sing all day, but eventually they stopped and the pastor came to the pulpit. Candace braced herself. She figured this would be the boring part. The pastor started off talking about the importance of Juneteenth. The pastor talked about hope. Wait, hold up. No. The importance of Juneteenth, equating the plight of black slaves to the Israelites in ancient Egypt. My bad. The pastor talked about hope, about faith, about staying on the right path, even when you can't see the promised land. Something tingled in Candace's body. She could feel it in her fingers and toes and heart. It was like the pastor had picked a sermon especially for her. Candace thought back to her grandmother's note on the back of the envelope. The path to the inheritance was there. She had already saw the first clue. She knew she'd figured out the rest of the mystery. She had just had to keep the faith. "Mom, we're going to talk to the Deacon Draper," Brandon said once church service ended. "We'll find you outside." "Who's Deacon Draper?" Candace asked, stepping out of the pew. "He's one of the older members." Brandon pointed to a short, round man standing near the front of the church. He was dressed like he was stuck in the 70s with a 3-piece chocolate brown suit and a wide yellow tie. That dude's sharp. "He's really nice," Brandon said, "but he also has a breath like a dragon, so be forewarned." That's not good. Can't be looking nice and got bad breath. By the time they made it to the front of the church, a woman and her family were already talking with the deacon. Same thing. "Is there anyone else we can talk about the Washingtons?" Candace whispered. She nodded toward another older man. "What about him? He looks important." "Not Deacon Hawk. He's kind of slimy. Mom says he talks like he's trying to sell you something." I feel that. The woman in front of them didn't look like she stopped talking anytime soon. How long did they have before Brandon's mother came searching for them? Candace spun around, hoping to find a clock, and saw Milo and his mother walking towards them. Brandon immediately stiffened. "Hello, you must be Abigail Caldwell's granddaughter," Milo's mother said, extending her hand to Candace. "I'm Miss Lynn Stanford. My friends call me Millie." She motioned to her son. "I believe you've already met Milo, yes?" "We've seen each other around the neighborhood," Candace said. She tried to keep her voice flat. She didn't want Milo's mother thinking that she and her son were friends. "I'm sorry that I haven't been able to drop by your house to properly introduce myself to you and your mother," she continued. "Milo here keeps me quite busy. Boy Scouts and choir practice at the church, swimming lessons, basketball, you name it, he does it." I feel that. I love shooting some hoops. Swimming. Milo smiled. Candace crossed her arms. "I noticed a large truck with Georgia license plates in your driveway the other day," Millie said. "Did your mother have friends in town? Not that I'm trying to pry. We've just had a few break-ins around the neighborhood, and I wanted to make sure." "It was my dad," Candace said. "He came to visit." "Oh, I was under the assumption that your parents were divorced, Mrs. Stanford said. Is everything okay with them and her? They're just fine. Candace plastered a big fake smile on her face, like her mother did when someone was being nosy about her marriage. But thank you so much for asking. The woman winked, like she didn't understand at all that Candace was seething on the inside, just trying to be a good neighbor. She set her sights on Brandon. I was sad not to see you on Milo's team this summer. Are you playing in another league? Brandon shook his head. I wanted to take a break. That's too bad. The team is doing really well. We could use a few other good players. She looked around and leaned closer to Brandon. And where's your friend Quincy? In Seattle for the summer with his grandparents, he said, his face to the ground. Oh, good. That's very good. She touched a gold cross hanging from her neck. It will probably serve the young man well to get out of the city for a while. Perhaps his grandparents can talk some sense into him. We'll be sure to keep him in our prayers. Brandon shrugged, his gaze still on his feet. Candace didn't know what was going on. She knew Brandon played basketball, but she didn't know he used to play on a team with Milo, no less. And who was Quincy? Milo stood there, still grinning, which made her even more upset. He saw what was happening with Brandon, how comfortable he was, and he liked it. She didn't blame Brandon for trying so hard to avoid Milo. She would have done the same, which gave her an idea. Candace cleared her throat. Milo, when are your games? It would be cool to come out and watch you play. Brandon shot Candace a look so harsh, she might as well have been literally stabbing him in the back. Trust me, she wanted to say. Saturday mornings at 10, Milo said. You're more than welcome to come, his mother added. She cupped her hand around her mouth like she was sharing a secret with Candace. Okay, I'll be honest, the competition around here is dreadful. We'll be off to camp next month, where he will be able to play against some boys who at least challenge him. Milo grinned even wider. What about practices? Candace asked. Are those open as well? I suppose, his mother said. They practice 3 times a week. I'm sorry for asking so many questions, Candace added a little twang to her voice, like her grandmother used to do when she wanted to sound especially southern. It's just that Mom's been looking for activities for me to do this summer. You said Milo does swimming too? At the what? At the city pool, Mrs. Stanford said. Your mother's welcome to call me if she wants any other suggestions. Brandon's mom has my number. I'll let Mom know, Candace said. Millie and Milo walked off to visit with Deacon Hawk. What was that all about? Brandon said. Later, we're up. The woman ahead of them had finally finished talking with Deacon Draper. The deacon grabbed Brandon's hand for a firm shake. What can I do for you, son? Whoa, Candace thought. His breath smelled like spicy sausage and onions. That's bad. This is my friend Candace, Brandon said. Do you have a few minutes? We'd like to give you a couple of questions about some past members of the church. Sure thing, but do you mind if we talk to my car? They nodded and followed the deacon down the hallway out of the church. He nodded to a few people as he passed, but thankfully no one tried to stop him to talk. Have you ever heard of a man named Enoch Washington or his wife Leanne? Brandon asked once they were out in the sunshine. Deacon Draper nodded. I knew Coach Doug. He was my position coach in football. He played linebacker for him for 3 years in high school. Candace walked up a little so she could see around Brandon. When did you graduate? 1957? 1950, he boasted, went into the Army right after Korea. The deacon pulled his keys from his pocket as he neared his car, a cream-colored Cadillac sedan. You mentioned 1957. Are you asking about the tennis game? I was back overseas when everything went down. It's a shame what happened to him. He was a good man, tough as a box of nails, but good, very competitive. Do you know anyone who was there that night? Candace asked. At the game? Afraid not. That was, 50, 60 years ago? Most of us ain't here anymore. He jingled his keys. Though Lord was willing, I plan to hang around for a lot longer. Candace smiled, his breath aside. She liked Deacon Draper. We were also hoping to find some information about his wife. Brandon said, we have this photo. He pulled the picture from his pocket and unfolded it. I think this is the old church building. Deacon Draper squinted as he brought the paper close to his face. Yep, that's the Washingtons, Coach Dub and Mrs. Leanne and Lil Dub. That was her nickname, Candace asked when she was a kid. He tapped his finger on the building behind the Washingtons. That's the old church, all right. Just a couple of miles down the street. It was a good building. We just got too big for it. Are there any records about the Washingtons in the church? Brandon asked. Anything we could look at? The deacon shook his head. I don't think so. There might be something in storage, but I doubt it. Maybe other members of the congregation might remember something about them. He looked at the photo again. Where did you get this from? Brandon and Candace shared a look. They shrugged at each other. From the Perkins Memorial Room, Brandon said, "This was a photo and the video tribute to Coach Washington." I knew it looked familiar, Deacon Draper said. The church used to have a copy of the same photo. Did you still have it? Candace asked. Maybe there was a clue hidden in the back of the photo. Perhaps we actually had a lot of photos. Had them all touched up and hung in the old sanctuary right after we converted it into a community center. He closed his eyes and looked up. Let's see. Greta was still alive. Nathan, our great-grand, had just been born. He sighed. Maybe that was somewhere around 2006, 2007. 2007. Maybe they found something on the photos related to the date on the letter and Siobhan's memorial website. Maybe we really love to see those photos, Candace said. I don't think they're hanging there anymore, he said, but I suppose they could be in a closet or storage room somewhere. Deacon Draper, Brandon began. If you don't mind me asking, how did the church pay for the community center? His voice was all squeaky. My bad. Donations and offerings, he said. You know, Pastor Richburg, he didn't want to hold no chicken bogs or fish fries to raise money. He nodded as he braced himself against his car. Yeah, some of it's coming back to me. We were promised a huge donation that would totally cover the renovation if we could open the building by the beginning of 2007. Can't remember who gave the money. I think it was anonymous, but I know it was plenty big. Another anonymous donation, Candace thought. Another instance of James Parker working behind the scenes. Did you make the deadline, Brennan asked? Deacon Draper nodded. We had to scramble, but we made it. The city manager was able to pull some strings for us. Candace froze. You okay? Deacon Draper asked her. Looks like you just saw a three-headed mule. It's just, she let out a long breath. Was Abigail Caldwell the city manager then? Sure was. Couldn't have gotten it done without her. She was my grandma, Candace said softly. My nose, stay running, my bad. I see, he mumbled. Well, just so you know, Miss Caldwell was remarkable, a true friend of this church, and the black community. Though we didn't realize it until her successor came along. I heard she moved back to Georgia. How she's doing? Candace touched her bracelet. She died 2 years ago. That's sad. Oh, I hadn't heard that. He pushed himself off his car and straightened his stance. Yeah, you better straighten your stance, boy. I'm so sorry for your loss. Candace nodded. She heard that phrase a lot when her grandmother first passed away, but she never knew the right way to respond. Can we go to the building today? Brandon asked. Candace never asked that question. That was Brandon. We really like to see if we could find those photos. I don't have the keys, but it'll be open tomorrow. I'll see if I can get someone to find those photos. He looked back at Candace. It's the least I can do for Abigail Caldwell's granddaughter. And that is chapter 18. So tomorrow I'll be reading chapter 19. So, yeah, that's about it. Peace out.